Right now, somewhere in the world, a country is buying oil. But the strange part is this. The country buying the oil is not America. The country selling the oil is not America. And yet, the payment is still happening in US dollars. Think about how insane that really is. A piece of paper created by one country became the center of the entire planet. Your food, your gas prices, your savings, your job market, stock markets, wars, sanctions, global power, all connected to one currency, the dollar. But here's the uncomfortable question almost nobody asks. What happens if one day the world slowly stops using it? Not in one dramatic collapse. Not overnight. But quietly. Country by country. Deal by deal. Bank by bank. Until one morning America wakes up and realizes the system that made it powerful for decades is slipping away. Because the truth is, the dollar is not powerful because it's paper. It's powerful because the world believes in it. And history has a brutal lesson about systems built on belief. The moment enough people stop believing, everything changes. Tonight, we're going to follow the chain reaction. How the dollar became king. Why the entire world depends on it. Why countries are suddenly trying to escape it. And what could happen to ordinary Americans if the dollar slowly loses its throne? Because if this system changes, your life changes with it. Even if you never invest. Even if you never trade currencies. Even if you don't care about economics at all. And the scariest part, the shift may have already started. To understand how dangerous this could become, you first need to understand something strange about money. Money is mostly a story. Seriously. Take a $100 bill. It's just paper and ink. You cannot eat it. You cannot build a house with it. It only works because everybody agrees it works. That's it. And throughout history, the world kept changing its main money. First it was gold. Then silver. Then powerful empires created their own trusted currencies. The Roman Empire had one. The British Empire had one. And for a long time, the British pound ruled global trade, because Britain controlled trade routes, shipping, colonies, banks. Power creates trust. And trust creates money dominance. But then the world changed. 2 world wars destroyed Europe. Countries were broke. Cities were in ruins. Meanwhile America became richer and stronger than almost everyone else. Factories booming. Gold reserves exploding. Military dominating. And suddenly the entire world needed America. So in 1944, while World War II was ending, 44 countries met in a place called Bretton Woods. This meeting quietly changed global history. Because the world made a deal. The US dollar would become the center of the financial system. And unlike other currencies, the dollar would be backed by gold. Meaning countries could trade their dollars for real gold anytime they wanted. That made everyone trust it. So slowly, the dollar became the global middleman. Countries traded with dollars. Banks stored dollars. Governments borrowed dollars. Oil was priced in dollars. And America gained something unbelievable. The ability to print the money the whole world needed. Imagine owning the only water machine in a desert. That's basically what America became. But then something happened. America started printing more dollars than it had gold. Way more. And eventually countries noticed. Especially France. They started asking a terrifying question. What if America cannot actually back all these dollars with gold? So countries began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. America was bleeding gold reserves. The system was cracking. Then in 1971, President Richard Nixon made one decision that changed everything forever. America stopped converting dollars into gold. Completely. The dollar was now backed by nothing. No gold. No silver. Just trust. And weirdly, instead of collapsing, the dollar became even stronger. Now here's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. Because after removing gold backing, America had a huge problem. Why would countries still trust the dollar if it was no longer tied to anything real? The answer came from oil. The most important resource on Earth. Cars needed it. Factories needed it. Airplanes needed it. Armies needed it. Without oil, modern civilization stops moving. So America made a quiet strategic deal with Saudi Arabia, one of the world's biggest oil producers. The deal was simple. Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in US dollars. And in return, America would provide military protection and support. This changed everything. Because now every country on Earth needed dollars to buy oil. Japan needed dollars. India needed dollars. China needed dollars. Europe needed dollars. Everyone needed dollars. And once countries started holding dollars for oil, they also started using dollars for trade. For savings. For reserves. For global business. This system became known as the petrodollar system. And it gave America insane advantages. America could borrow cheaply. Print money more easily. Run massive deficits. Buy real goods from the world using its own currency. Meanwhile other countries had to work for dollars. America could literally create them. That's why people say the dollar is not just money. It's power. Massive power. Because when your currency controls global trade, you control pressure points of the world economy. You can sanction countries. Freeze assets. Cut nations out of the system. And for decades, almost nobody could challenge it. Because America was too powerful economically, too powerful militarily, and too central financially. The dollar became like oxygen in the global economy, invisible, but everywhere. Until slowly, countries started asking a dangerous question. What if depending on one country's currency is too risky? Imagine your entire life savings were stored inside someone else's house. And one day, that person suddenly locks the door. That's basically what terrified many countries. Because America discovered something powerful. If the dollar controls global finance, then America can use finance like a weapon. Sanctions became stronger. Countries could be blocked from global banking systems. Assets could be frozen. Trade could become impossible. And after events like the Russia sanctions, many governments around the world quietly realized something. If this can happen to them, it could happen to us too, so countries started looking for exits. China began pushing trade in yuan. Russia reduced dollar usage. Some oil deals started happening in other currencies. BRICS countries began discussing alternatives. Central banks started buying huge amounts of gold again. Not because the dollar was dead, but because countries suddenly wanted backup plans. That's the important part. The dollar does not need to collapse for America to feel pain. It only needs to weaken slowly. A little less demand. A little less trust. A little less dependence. That alone could change everything. And most Americans don't realize how much their lifestyle depends on global dollar demand. Because when the world constantly wants your currency, you can live very differently. You can borrow more cheaply. Import more products. Maintain stronger markets. Support larger spending. But if demand weakens, the hidden bill eventually arrives. Now let's make this personal. Because geopolitics sounds far away. Until it hits your wallet. If the dollar slowly loses dominance, the first thing Americans may notice is prices. Higher prices everywhere. Why? Because America imports enormous amounts of goods. Electronics. Clothes. Machines. Materials. Consumer products. A weaker dollar makes imports more expensive. That means inflation pressure rises. And inflation is brutal because it feels invisible at first. You still work the same hours. But your money quietly buys less. Then comes borrowing. America survives heavily on debt, government debt, corporate debt, consumer debt. And right now the world helps finance that system partly because dollar assets are trusted globally. But if global demand weakens, borrowing becomes harder and more expensive. Interest rates rise. Debt payments explode. Housing gets hit. Businesses slow down. Markets become unstable. Then comes the psychological effect. For decades Americans grew up inside the center of the global system. The dollar always strong. Treasuries always trusted. America always dominant. But reserve currency status creates confidence. And confidence affects everything. Investing. Consumption. Politics. Global influence. Once cracks appear, fear spreads faster than logic. And markets hate uncertainty. But here's the twist most people miss. This would probably not look like a Hollywood collapse. Not one giant explosion. More like a slow leak. Year after year. Less dominance. Less leverage. Less financial flexibility. And slowly, the world becomes more multipolar. More fragmented. Less centered around America. Here's the crazy irony in all of this. The dollar became dominant because the world trusted America. But some of the actions used to protect American power may also encourage countries to slowly move away from it. It's like holding sand too tightly. The tighter you squeeze, the more slips through your fingers. And yet, despite all the headlines, the dollar is still incredibly powerful. Because replacing the dollar is unbelievably difficult. You need trust. Massive financial markets. Military strength. Political influence. Stable institutions. Global liquidity. And no country fully matches all of that yet. China has economic power. But many investors still don't fully trust its system. Europe has large markets. But lacks unified political strength. Gold is stable. But impractical for modern trade. Crypto is volatile. And governments don't want to lose monetary control. So the world remains trapped in a strange situation. Many countries want alternatives. But no alternative is strong enough yet. Which means the future may not be a sudden replacement. But a gradual diversification. A world where the dollar matters less than before, instead of disappearing completely. And honestly, that alone would still reshape global power forever. The rise of the dollar was never just about money. It was about trust. Power. Fear. Trade. Oil. War. And belief. For nearly a century, America sat at the center of the financial universe. Not because everyone loved America, but because the system worked. At least better than the alternatives. But history shows something important. No dominant system lasts forever. Not Rome. Not the British Empire. Not any currency. The real question is not whether change eventually comes. The real question is how slowly it happens. Because slow changes are the most dangerous. People ignore them. Until one day the world suddenly looks different. And they wonder when everything changed. Maybe the dollar remains king for another 50 years. Maybe a new system slowly emerges. Maybe the future belongs to multiple currencies instead of one. Nobody knows for sure. But one thing is certain. The moment the world no longer needs the dollar the same way it once did, America changes. And if America changes, the entire world changes with it. Because whether people realize it or not, modern life has been built around one giant financial belief. The belief that the dollar will always be king, and history has a strange habit. Every empire sounds permanent, right before the world changes.